Mr. Vance, I'm very sorry. Miss Hayes' condition has reached its final stage. We've done everything we could.
Final stage? No. There has to be a trial. In Switzerland. A specialist in Japan. Money is not a problem. I'll pay anything.
Sir, that's not our most urgent concern. Your granddaughter, Mia, has inherited the same condition.
Have you ever wondered what true helplessness feels like? It's not when you have nothing. It's when you have everything, and all of it becomes meaningless. That was the moment tech billionaire Ethan Vance realized his $50 billion empire couldn't buy him a single second more of life for the ones he loved. How did it all come to this? Why was a king of Silicon Valley, a titan of skyscrapers, standing here, broken and powerless against fate? To understand this fateful moment, we have to go back exactly 1 week. When Ethan Vance was still another man, one hidden behind the perfect veneer of wealth and cold power. Until, on a drizzly Chicago afternoon, he saw two little angels with honey-colored hair and amber eyes. Eyes he had tried to forget for 20 years. Clara's eyes. This isn't just a moving story. This is a journey to uncover a conspiracy buried for 2 decades. A story of the most cruel betrayal, of a stolen legacy, and of a truth with the power to destroy an entire empire. Follow along with me, because what's about to be revealed will make you question everything you think you know about love, family, and the true price of power. 1 week ago, Ethan Vance's world was a symphony of glass, steel, and zeros. From his penthouse on the 92nd floor of the St. Regis Chicago, he could see the vast expanse of Lake Michigan and a city nestled at his feet. People called him a genius, a visionary, the uncrowned king of the tech world. But in the sterile silence of his $20 million apartment, there was no laughter, only the echo of his own loneliness. His life was scheduled to the minute. Meetings in Shanghai in the morning, negotiations in London in the afternoon. His assistant's voice through an earpiece was his most constant companion. Everything was perfect, controlled, and crushingly empty. That afternoon, a cold, characteristic Chicago drizzle began to fall. Fed up with the specially brewed coffee served by his staff, Ethan decided to do something he hadn't done in years. Take a walk. He waved off his assistant's reminders, stepped out of the Rolls-Royce, and headed toward a small coffee shop he used to love as a student. As he turned the corner, under the awning of the historic Chicago Theater with its vibrant but nostalgic neon lights, he saw them. 2 small specks of color. 2 little girls huddled together to avoid the cold raindrops, their honey-colored hair damp against their foreheads. They were playing rock, paper, scissors, their tiny giggles nearly swallowed by the city's noise. And then one of them looked up. Ethan froze. Time seemed to stop. The air caught in his chest. Those eyes. Amber. Not brown, not green. Amber. Clara's eyes. The eyes he had looked into during their first kiss. The eyes that had haunted his dreams for 20 years. Decades of defenses, the icy walls he had carefully built around his heart, crumbled in an instant. The little girl with the amber eyes, perhaps noticing his stare, nudged her sister. The other girl, who seemed bolder, took a step toward him. "Mister," her voice was clear and crisp, "can you spare some change? My mom's in the hospital." "The hospital?" The word escaped Ethan's lips, hoarse, almost foreign to him. "Your mom? What's wrong?" "She's sick," the girl with the amber eyes whispered, clutching a worn-out teddy bear. "Her name is Clara." Half an hour later, Ethan was sitting in the waiting room of Northwestern Memorial Hospital, the sharp smell of antiseptic stinging his nostrils. The 2 girls, Maya and Mia, sat obediently beside him, too overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events. Finally, a nurse called his name. As he walked into the room at the end of the hall, he had braced himself. But what he saw still made his heart clench. The woman on the bed was a shadow of his memory. The vibrant, honey-colored hair was now dull and short. Her face was gaunt, her skin pale, but those eyes, though tired, were still unmistakably amber. She turned her head, and when she saw him, a flicker of weak recognition sparked. "Ethan?" Her voice was just a whisper. He pulled up a chair, sat down beside the bed, trying to find words in a chaotic sea of emotions. "Clara," he began. Why did you disappear?" Tears welled in Clara's eyes. "I wrote," she said, her voice breaking. "Dozens of letters. You never answered. Your parents said you had a new life, that you didn't want to be bothered by the past?" "No." Ethan shook his head, a cold dread running down his spine. "I never got any letters." Silence fell between them, heavy with 20 years of misunderstanding and lies. To break the air, Ethan asked about her life, her work. Clara smiled weakly. "Before I got sick," she said, "I was a programmer. I spent years developing something, a predictive AI algorithm. It could analyze medical data to predict health crises before symptoms appeared. I called it Aura." Ethan felt the blood freeze in his veins. Aura, the Aura AI. It was the foundation, the very cornerstone of his entire Vance Dynamics empire. It was the technology that had put him on top of the world. "Clara," he said, his voice barely audible. "That idea, did you ever tell anyone about it?" Clara's gaze drifted, lost in a distant memory. "Just one person," she whispered. "A long time ago, when I needed funding for my university project. I was so naive. I pitched it to one person, only one. Your mother." Clara's words hung in the sterile air of the hospital room, but to Ethan, they were a cataclysmic explosion. His mother. The final piece of the puzzle slotted into place, and the picture it revealed was not a masterpiece of success, but a grotesque mural of deceit. His entire life, the whole empire he had sweat and bled to build, was all grown from a stolen seed. A cold fury, a sense of betrayal so deep it felt elemental, rose in Ethan. He didn't say another word, simply stood, the chair making a dry scrape on the floor. He turned and walked out of the room, leaving Clara with a look of pained confusion, because he now had a different war to fight. The Rolls-Royce tore through the night, Chicago's lights blurring into abstract streaks through the window. Ethan didn't see them. He only saw the face of his mother, Eleanor Vance, in his mind. The woman with the perfectly coiffed platinum hair who had taught him that compassion was a weakness and winning was the only objective. He had once worshipped her. Now he only felt a rising tide of disgust. This luxury car, that penthouse, all these symbols of power, now felt like the bars of a cage built from her lies. He didn't need an appointment. He stormed past the secretary, pushing open the heavy oak doors of the top-floor office of the Vance Dynamics building. Eleanor was behind her glass and chrome desk, a queen on her throne. She looked up, her ice-blue eyes showing clear annoyance at the intrusion. "Ethan, what are you doing here at this hour?" Ethan didn't answer. He walked forward, placed both hands on her desk, and said a single word, one that now carried the weight of a lifetime. "Aura." Eleanor didn't flinch. She just gave a slight, almost imperceptible smirk, a smile full of arrogance. "I wondered when you'd figure it out," she said, her voice even and cold. "You should be thanking me. That idea was just a fanciful student project in the hands of some country girl with no vision. I saw its potential. I saw the diamond in the mud. I took it, polished it, and gave it to you. I gave you a sword, and you used it to conquer the world. Don't complain about where I found the ore." Her logic, her complete lack of remorse, stunned Ethan more than a denial would have. "You destroyed her," he growled, You stole her future." "I secured your future," Eleanor countered, her voice sharpening. "A future untethered by the mistakes of youth." "Mistakes?" Ethan nearly shouted. "Loving someone is a mistake? What about the letters? Why did you block her letters? Why lie to both of us?" Eleanor leaned back in her chair, her long fingers steepling. She looked at her son as if he were a naive child in need of a lesson. "Because it was more complicated than that," she said. And then she dropped the second bomb, one with far greater destructive power. "Because after you left, she found out she was pregnant." The air was sucked from the room. Ethan felt an invisible hand clench around his chest. He took a step back, the floor seeming to tilt beneath him. "Pregnant? I have a child?" The question came out as a shattered whisper, holding the pain of 20 years of a loss he never even knew existed. Eleanor nodded, her face a mask of indifference. "A girl. She named her Sophie." "Sophie?" Ethan repeated the name, a name he'd never heard. He had a daughter. Where is she now? I have to see her." For the first time, a strange flicker of emotion crossed Eleanor's face. It wasn't remorse, perhaps pity, but the pity of a god for a mortal. "You can't," she said flatly. "You're too late." "What do you mean, too late? What are you talking about?" Eleanor rose, walked to the window, and looked down at the glittering city below, the empire she had helped build at all costs. "She grew up without you. She was a brilliant programmer, just like her mother." "Very clever," she said, almost conversationally. "She and her husband died in a tragic car accident last year." A car accident. The words echoed in Ethan's head. He thought of Clara fading in the hospital. He thought of Sophie, the daughter he never knew, already gone. And then he thought of the two little girls in the waiting room, two little angels with amber eyes. Maya, Mia, Clara's grandchildren, Sophie's children. And they were. "My granddaughters," Ethan whispered, a horrifying, soul-shattering truth taking shape in his mind. "They're my granddaughters." The truth hit Ethan like a sledgehammer. His granddaughters. The two small, scared souls in the hospital waiting room were his own flesh and blood, the living legacy of the daughter he never got to hold. He looked at his mother, Eleanor, standing by the window with her unshakable, proud posture, and for the first time in his life, he didn't see a mother, but a monster in human skin. The rage didn't vanish, it transformed. It was no longer the hot anger of a betrayed man, but a cold, crystalline purpose. He wouldn't waste another second arguing with her. His war was different now. Without another word, Ethan turned and walked out of the office, leaving Eleanor to her empire of lies. He raced back to the hospital, every second on his Patek Philippe watch a taunt. When he arrived, he found Maya and Mia in a family waiting room. Maya, ever the big sister, was reading a story to Mia, who had her head on her sister's shoulder, her face looking paler and more tired than before. Ethan approached, kneeling before them. He no longer saw two strangers. He saw his legacy. He saw Clara's eyes, a smile from Sophie he could only imagine, and a future he had to protect at all costs. "It's going to be okay," he whispered, a promise to them and to himself. As they walked back toward Clara's room together, a horrifying event tore through the false quiet of the hospital corridor. Mia, holding Ethan's hand, suddenly stopped. She swayed, her eyes wide with a moment of pained surprise. "Grandpa," she managed, then collapsed to the floor. The sound of her small body hitting the polished tile was a sickeningly dull thud. "Mia!" Ethan screamed, a cry of raw, primal terror. Maya shrieked, her own cry echoing down the hall. Instantly, nurses and doctors swarmed. Code Blue, room 312, pediatric respiratory distress. Everything became a blur of urgent calls, the squeal of a crash cart's wheels, and strained faces. Ethan was pushed to the edge of the whirlwind, his hand still feeling the warmth from Mia's small hand as it slipped away. He could only stand there, helpless, watching them wheel his granddaughter away, his heart feeling as if it were being crushed. An hour later, Ethan sat in a small, sterile white consulting room. The chaos had passed, leaving an even more terrifying silence. The doctor from the opening scene entered, his face even graver than before. He placed a file on the table. "Mr. Vance," he began, "we have a preliminary diagnosis. As we feared, this is a case of hereditary hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. It's a disease that causes the heart muscle to become abnormally thick, making it difficult to pump blood." The doctor explained that Clara had been living with the condition for years, but Mia's was a much more aggressive and rapid form, common in young children. It was likely that his lost daughter, Sophie, had also carried the gene. Grief and regret seized Ethan. If he had been there, if he had known, could he have done something? Could he have saved Sophie? And then, the doctor spoke the words Ethan had already heard in his worst nightmare. The words that began this story. "Her condition is critical. We're talking about weeks, not months." In that moment, something inside Ethan broke and reset. The pain, anger, regret, and abject fear all melted down and were forged into a single thing: steely resolve. The despair vanished, replaced by a cold, terrifying focus. He was no longer the broken man from his mother's office. He was Ethan Vance, a titan of industry, and he would leverage every resource, every contact, every last dollar to fight the death sentence just pronounced on his granddaughter. He pulled out his phone. The first call was to his top legal team. The second was to his corporate security chief, a former Mossad operative. "I want everything on the car accident of Sophie Hayes and her husband James Anderson from 1 year ago," Ethan commanded, his voice devoid of any tremor. "Police reports, scene photos, witnesses, medical examiner's report, every detail. Leave no stone unturned." He knew the official record wouldn't be enough. Sophie's accident, coming so soon after she'd uncovered Eleanor's secrets, couldn't be a coincidence. To find the truth, he needed someone unbound by rules. He needed someone who understood the dark corners of the tech world, someone who had a reason to hate Eleanor Vance as much as he did. And in his mind, a name began to form. A name buried in Sophie's old emails: David Chen. The hunt was on. For the next 24 hours, Ethan Vance experienced a sensation he rarely encountered: impotence. He could deploy the best cybersecurity experts, the most expensive private investigators, but David Chen seemed to have vanished from the face of the earth. No social media presence, no active bank accounts, no registered addresses. He was a ghost in the system. Ethan's security team reported back that Chen had completely scrubbed his digital footprint a year ago, right after Sophie died. That wasn't the act of a man hiding. It was the act of a man preparing for war. This fact only hardened Ethan's resolve. Desperate, Ethan turned to the only thing he could hold on to: the remnants of Sophie's life. He spent the night combing through old hard drives, closed email accounts his team had recovered. And then he found it. A tiny detail, an entry point. A private, military-grade encrypted gaming forum where Sophie and David used to talk about projects and play long, drawn-out games of online chess. It was their safe space. Ethan knew he couldn't force his way in. He had to use bait. Using Sophie's old account, he logged in and left a single message on the forum. A message only David would understand. "Aura is in danger. Need to find the echo of truth. Her father is looking. Less than 6 hours later, an encrypted email arrived on one of Ethan's burner servers. No greeting, no signature. Just a set of coordinates and a time. Midnight, Pier 7. Come alone. Pier 7 was in a derelict industrial park on the south side of Chicago, a skeleton of a once booming steel industry. The wind off Lake Michigan was cold, carrying the smell of rust and decay. Ethan, in his cashmere coat, felt completely out of place. He ordered his security team to stay 2 miles back. He had to do this alone. As he stepped into the dark, damp warehouse, a voice called out from the shadows, sharp and hostile. "What do you want?" A man stepped out. He was thin, his eyes dark with lack of sleep and suspicion, but his gaze was razor sharp. It was David Chen. "I have nothing to say to a Vance," David said, his hand in his jacket pocket, ready to either run or fight. "I'm not here as a Vance," Ethan said, his voice surprisingly low and calm. "I'm here as Sophie's father." That stopped David. The hostility in his eyes was replaced by a flash of pained curiosity. Ethan told him everything, about Clara, about Mia and her illness, about the confrontation with Eleanor, and the truth of Aura AI. He spared no detail, including his own ignorance and unwitting role in the tragedy. David listened, his face an unreadable mask, but his fists were clenched in his pockets. When Ethan finished, David let out a bitter laugh. "So you finally woke up," he said. "Sophie knew. She knew your mother was a snake. She'd discovered her money laundering operations, how she was using Vance Dynamics itself to enrich shady partners. That's why she had to be silenced." "The accident," Ethan whispered. "It was arranged." "I don't have proof," David admitted, "but Sophie did. She knew her mother wouldn't stop at threats. She told me she was creating a black box, a hard drive with everything, a silver bullet that could take down the whole empire. She said she was hiding it in the safest place she could think of." "Where?" Ethan pressed, hope rising in him. David looked Ethan square in the eye, a bitter understanding forming between the two strangers, two men who had loved the same lost woman. "Sophie was smart," David said. "She knew Eleanor could buy cops, could hack any system. So she protected her evidence with the one thing your mother could never replicate or steal, her father's DNA." Ethan was stunned. "My DNA?" "That's right," David confirmed. "The drive can only be unlocked by your biometric signature. Sophie always believed you'd find the truth one day. She left the key for you. It's in a fireproof box, hidden in a secret compartment under the floorboards in the closet of the old apartment Clara used to live in. An alliance was formed in the dark of that abandoned warehouse, an alliance built on shared grief and a burning desire for justice. She took my daughter and your best friend," Ethan said, his voice now like steel. "She's not going to take my granddaughter too." David nodded, and for the first time, the suspicion in his eyes was gone, replaced by a resolute fire. "We're going to take her down," he said. For Sophie, Clara's old apartment was in a modest brownstone in Lincoln Park, a world away from the cold glass towers Ethan called home. The air inside still held the ghost of a life that had been lived. The smell of old books, baked waffles, and a faint scent of lavender. Ethan moved like a phantom through the life he should have had. He touched the pencil-marked height chart for Sophie on a doorframe, ran a finger over the collection of small glass animals Clara had loved, and looked at the sagging bookshelves filled with well-worn fairy tales. This was a home built with love, not money, and the truth of it was a sharp, physical ache. Following David's instructions, they went to the master bedroom. In the corner of the closet, behind old clothes, was a floorboard that looked no different from the others. Ethan had to use a small knife to pry it up. Underneath, nestled in a small cavity, was a heavy, fireproof metal box. Ethan's heart pounded as he placed it on a table. Inside, among important papers like birth certificates and insurance policies, was a blue external hard drive with a silver fingerprint scanner on its surface. It looked so small, so ordinary, but both Ethan and David knew they were holding a time bomb. They didn't open it there. They took it back to a temporary war room Ethan had set up in a secure downtown office, outfitted with the latest in security tech. David connected the drive to a standalone server. The scanner lit up with a red light, waiting. "It won't read a normal print," David explained. "Sophie coded it to read DNA patterns from the epidermis. It has to be you." With a deep breath, Ethan pressed his thumb to the scanner. He felt a tiny, sharp prick, and then the light switched from red to a brilliant green. A soft click sound came from the computer's speakers as the drive successfully mounted. With one small prick and a single click, 20 years of lies began to unravel. The first folder Ethan opened wasn't evidence. It was simply named Family. Hundreds of files appeared. Ethan clicked on a video. A chubby toddler with amber eyes toddled across a lawn. Sophie's laugh, clear and joyful, filled the room. One video followed another. Her first day of school, a piano recital, her college graduation with a radiant smile. There were photos with her husband, James, looking blissfully happy. And then, more recent videos of Sophie playing with Maya and Mia in a park. Tears began to stream down Ethan's face. For the first time, he wasn't just mourning the idea of a lost daughter. He was meeting her. He heard her laugh, saw the way she squinted when she was thinking, just like him. He hadn't just lost a daughter. He had lost a universe of precious moments. After a long moment of raw, unadulterated grief, David gently put a hand on his shoulder. "Ethan, we have to keep going." Ethan nodded, wiping his tears, his face hardening. He opened the second folder. Evidence, Vance Dynamics. Inside was a complex web of spreadsheets, offshore bank transactions, encrypted emails. It laid out in meticulous, undeniable detail how Eleanor had siphoned hundreds of millions of dollars from her own company. This is what Sophie had found. But there was one last subfolder, named with a single string of numbers, the date of Sophie's accident. Ethan's heart stopped. Inside was only one audio file. David hit play. Eleanor's voice came through, cold and precise as always, but this time she was speaking to a man with a gravelly voice. "Sanderson's curiosity has become an unacceptable risk to our operation," Eleanor said. "What do you want me to do?" the man asked. A long pause. Then Eleanor's reply, each word a dagger in Ethan's heart. "This risk needs to be neutralized, permanently. Make it look like an accident. Leave no trace." The recording ended. The room was silent. The proof was there, irrefutable. His mother hadn't just stolen his future. She was a murderer. Ethan's grief now morphed into something else, something pure and terrifying. A burning rage. The man who had been weeping for his daughter moments ago was gone. In his place was a judge. He looked at David, whose face was a mask of furious determination. Ethan turned to the large screen, pulling up the schedule for the upcoming InnovateCon Tech conference. His mother's keynote address was highlighted. "She loves the stage," Ethan said, his voice ice cold. "Then we'll give her a performance the world will never forget." 3 days later, the main hall of the McCormick Place Convention Center in Chicago was packed. It was the opening night of InnovateCon, the cathedral of the tech world, where the brightest minds and most powerful investors gathered. The stage lights were brilliant, the air electric with excitement and the promise of the future. And on that stage, in a cobalt blue power dress, was Eleanor Vance. She was at her zenith, a respected tech queen, about to deliver her keynote address on legacy and integrity in the digital age. She spoke with fluid conviction. She spoke of responsibility, of building a better future, of a legacy measured not just in profit, but in positive social impact. Integrity, she declared, her voice resonating through the hall, must be the bedrock of all innovation. It is the true legacy we leave for the generations to come. Thousands applauded. Ethan, watching from a secret control room with David, just gave a slight smile. Her performance was about to end. And then it happened. Just as Eleanor was preparing for her closing remarks, the massive screen behind her suddenly flickered. The Vance Dynamics logo vanished, replaced by solid black. Her microphone cut out. A murmur went through the crowd, assuming a technical glitch. The house lights dimmed, leaving a single spotlight on the now confused Eleanor. Then, on the black screen, a single word appeared in simple white font: truth. A voice came over the sound system, not Eleanor's, but Ethan's. His voice was calm, clear, but held a chill that made the entire auditorium hold its breath. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we speak of legacy. Allow me to tell you about a legacy that was stolen. On the screen, a photo appeared. A young woman with honey-colored hair and brilliant amber eyes, beaming next to a university science project. This was Clara Hayes, Ethan's voice narrated. A brilliant scientist. The photo changed to a little girl blowing out birthday candles. And this was our daughter, Sophie, our legacy. A montage of images flashed by. Sophie at graduation, Sophie on her wedding day, Sophie holding her twin daughters. A legacy of love and intellect. Eleanor, on stage, began to realize what was happening. Her face went white. She gestured to the tech crew, but no one could do anything. David had locked down the entire system. The screen changed again. Now it was a series of financial documents, complex money transfer diagrams to offshore shell companies, encrypted emails. And this, Ethan's voice continued, is the true legacy built by the woman on this stage, Eleanor Vance, a legacy of greed built on an idea stolen from Clara Hayes. The hall erupted in shocked whispers. All eyes turned to Eleanor, who stood frozen like an ice sculpture. But the worst crime, Ethan's voice grew lower, more dangerous, wasn't about money, it was about a life. The screen went black again. The entire hall fell silent. A tense silence so profound you could hear a pin drop. And then, an audio file played, with no video, only a voice. Eleanor's voice, cold and precise, filled the room. S. Anderson's curiosity has become an unacceptable risk to our operation. It was followed by a strange man's voice. What do you want me to do? A long pause. Then Eleanor's fateful reply, echoing in the horrified silence of thousands. This risk needs to be neutralized, permanently. Make it look like an accident. Leave no trace. A collective gasp went through the auditorium. Eleanor Vance's perfect mask shattered. Horror, disbelief, and pure animal fear were plain on her face. She stumbled, grabbing the lectern to keep from falling. At that exact moment, the house lights came up. The doors at the back of the hall burst open. Dozens of FBI agents in dark uniforms marched in, walking with grim purpose down the aisles. They walked directly onto the stage. Mrs. Eleanor Vance, the lead agent's voice was clear. You are under arrest for suspicion of fraud, conspiracy, and in connection with the death of Sophie Anderson. As they handcuffed the most powerful woman in tech, she offered no resistance, only mumbled incoherently. And as they led her off the stage of her own humiliation, Ethan's voice came over the speakers one last time, a whisper for the world and for the one person who wasn't there. This is for you, Sophie. Your justice has been served. The tech world convulsed. Headlines screamed across every outlet. Tech queen arrested? Vance empire crumbles in shocking scandal. The onstage arrest of Eleanor Vance at InnovateCon became one of the biggest media events of the year. But while the outside world dissected every detail of the scandal, Ethan Vance was gone. He wasn't celebrating his victory, not answering calls from the press. He was back where his real fight was, at Mia's hospital bedside. Justice had been served, but the biological clock on his granddaughter's life was still ticking. And then, in the depths of despair, a glimmer of hope. The doctors announced an experimental gene therapy, a breakthrough method that was also highly risky. In a twist of fate, the therapy was being pioneered by a biotech startup that Vance Dynamics had recently acquired. And to maximize the chances of success, the doctors needed to use a predictive AI system to monitor the response of every cell in Mia's body. That system was none other than Aura AI. Fate, in a cruel and beautiful way, had come full circle. Clara's stolen idea was now the only hope to save her granddaughter. Without a moment's hesitation, Ethan signed the consent forms. Weeks of tension passed. Mia's surgery was a success, but the recovery was slow and challenging. Meanwhile, Clara's own battle was coming to an end. Her body was too tired. One golden afternoon, in the quiet hospital room, Clara held Ethan's hand. Mia, though weak, was asleep in a small bed next to her, while Maya sat coloring by the window. The atmosphere wasn't tragic, but strangely peaceful. "You did it," Clara whispered, her amber eyes shining with pride. "You got justice for Sophie." "We did it," Ethan corrected, his voice thick with emotion. Clara smiled. "Ethan, promise me something. Let them know about their mother, about us, about a love that started so long ago, and live my share of life, too. Laugh, love, be happy." She looked over at her two granddaughters, then back at Ethan, her gaze holding all of 20 lost years and a love that never faded. Then she slowly closed her eyes and peacefully let go. 6 months later. Chicago in autumn, the leaves a brilliant riot of color. There was no more Vance Dynamics. Ethan had done the unthinkable. He dissolved the $50 billion corporation. From its ashes, he established the Aura Hayes Foundation, a nonprofit named for both the woman he loved and the daughter he never knew. The foundation had 2 goals: to fund medical research into rare genetic diseases and to invest in ethical tech companies, those that put people before profit. His legacy was no longer skyscrapers, but saved lives. On that Sunday afternoon, Ethan was with a now completely healthy Maya and Mia, flying a kite in Lincoln Park. The phoenix-shaped kite soared high against the blue sky, with the majestic Chicago skyline behind it. "Grandpa?" Mia asked, her clear eyes looking up at the sky. "Do you think Grandma Clara and Mommy Sophie can see us?" Ethan knelt, pulling both of them into a hug. "I'm sure they can," he said, his voice warm. "And I think they are very, very proud of you too." "Grandma Eleanor will never bother us again, right, Grandpa?" Maya asked, her voice holding the certainty of someone who had grown up far too much through the turmoil. "Never," Ethan affirmed. "She'll never bother anyone again." As the sun began to set, casting a golden-orange glow on Lake Michigan, Ethan watched the 2 children laugh and play. He realized that after everything, he had found the one thing he had always lacked. Not power, not wealth, but a home. His own voice, no longer a CEO's, but a grandfather's, a father's, echoed in his thoughts, a final lesson learned. They say legacy is what you leave behind. But maybe the real legacy is what you find after you've lost everything. The real legacy isn't carved in stone or written in financial reports. It's written in the stories we tell, the lives we touch, and the love we choose to give. Every single day. The phoenix kite still flew high, a symbol of rebirth and hope, over the city that had witnessed all his tragedy and triumph. And this time, Ethan Vance was truly free.